Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Authors Vox. Today I'm joined by Andre Flitcher. I just realized I never asked you how to pronounce your last name. Is it Flitcher?
Yeah, Flitcher is my pseudonym. Yeah.
Pseudonym? Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm joined by A.G. Flitcher, the author
Mhm.
of Black Rose Cocoon, a wonderful, I'm going to say horror thriller mystery novel that is available now. AG, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I am A.G. Flitcher. Um, I started out as an urban fantasy author and screenwriter, and then I got kind of bored, and it was like, I'm gonna try some other stuff. Um, the thing about me as a writer is, and I actually got this from my business writing class. Um, there are genre writers, and there are the ones who are like, nah, whatever. So, that's kind of what I am, like, obviously, as a writer, you have to have some kind of specifics when you're actually putting your work out there, but for me, it's more like, what is necessary for the story, and what am I trying to say here? Like, is it literally just create escape for both myself and the reader, or is there a bigger picture here? As for where I'm from, I am from a little town called Aldergrove in BC, Canada.
Oh, very nice.
Um, yeah, and that's probably why I also have a love for Stephen King. Um, as for who I am as a person, which to me is what kind of bridges fiction and reality of who I am as a person and a writer, I'm genuinely quite curious about people. I purposely try to be either neutral or match the person's energy at first when I first meet them, and then I show who I really am and how I want to be treated. And if their energy doesn't match the one I'm trying to give them, I go, no, no, thank you, bye. So,
Fair enough.
uh, so that's how I developed as a person and as a writer. Like to me, if you're gonna do something like fantasy, which is such a big genre in writing,
Hmm.
you have to kind of develop um, a bigger catalog of life experience before diving into that. Because when you first start writing anything fantasy, especially if it's a series, you have to have a certain naivety about it, where you have to be willing to kind of wish the real world was extremely magical in the sense of breaking the rules of how the norm of everything works. So when wrote Boone and Jack, my urban fantasy series, that wasn't really me saying I want to write fantasy. It's me saying there are things in my past I haven't actually worked on. I'm gonna show the mirror image of what I wished life was. Um, in the difficult parts of my life. But now that I've worked through all that, I want to separate myself from the next fantasy series I write and give the world and the characters their own energy and life form that doesn't belong to me. It only belongs to them.
Incredible. That's an incredible point of view to have. And especially, considering the content of the book we're talking about today, to see the difference between, say, high fantasy and this is quite uh what's the word I'm looking for? Not polarizing, quite opposite. But first let's I got some specific questions for you personally. I ask everyone who comes on the podcast for the first time because this is technically, by definition, it's a fantasy podcast and that we talk about
Yeah.
fantasy and sci-fi.
Mhm.
What is your favorite magic system? Now, a magic system, as you know, is something that it's in fantasy. It's how they do the magic or how they explain stuff that
Mhm.
can come from TV, movies, books, whatever you'd like.
I would say spells and items, specifically in hard magic, because to me, this is I just had it on my phone. I was listening to a podcast called Living Lore, where they're explaining hard versus soft magic. And specifically, like in, for example, Harry Potter. Harry Potter gets away with soft magic because even though it's not really explained to the reader why they're able to do these things, they get away with it through the schooling. So, um, I prefer spells and items in hard magic because that means that there are limitations to what they can do, and it's explained to the reader. So it takes Stranger Things, for example. That's soft magic. We don't know
Mhm.
why the Upside Down is there. Who the hell is this Mind Flayer? Why there's a wormhole, the Abyss, the Dimension X, all this stuff. It's just like, please believe this and don't ask any more questions. Um, so that's why I prefer hard magic. Like whenever I'm gonna start working on my fantasy series, maybe in like 3, 4 years, um, I'm really going to educate myself because my preferences in magic systems now is essentially based on my um leisure reading preferences. Not just in fantasy, but in anything I read, where I want a balance of like the what was this? J.K. Rowling did this. It was the 75-35. Like 75% of her work is explaining to you how things look and how the world is. And then she expects you to finish the rest of the imagination yourself. That's kind of how I want to do it, and that's how I will decide in the future, um, hard versus soft magic that is needed, for my world.
Fantastic. Um, it's really interesting because we don't talk enough about the limitations of hard magic versus soft magic, especially in series like Harry Potter, which is very easy. But when you, depending on if you're a Dungeons and Dragons player, you can do either hard or soft, being you need spell components or you're just acting rule of cool. So let's dive a little bit more into. You said you've been writing for a while. You have a few series. You took a business writing class. How long have you been writing?
Um, Including screenwriting, which was 2014, that would be 12 years.
12 years. And
Yeah.
you was there I don't know how am I gonna put this? Black Rose Cocoon is a very, interesting novel because of the subject matter. Was there an inspiration, for Black Rose Cocoon that you can, what's the word I'm looking for here? That you can pinpoint, or was it just something you came up with and
No,
wrote out?
there is a pinpoint. Okay, so this is actually a pretty specific moment in my life when I decided to write Black Rose Cocoon. I was writing the last book of the Moon Shack, which is called it's right next to me. Um, Sehon, I think. Yeah, Sehon. Sehon's like the final the final boss in my series. Um, when I was finishing it, I was like, I don't really feel comfortable writing or jumping back into fantasy right when I finish fantasy. I want to write a few like passion projects that are completely different from anything I've ever even dreamed of trying. So I was like, well, true crime documentaries are plastered everywhere in streaming services. And I have friends who love that stuff and even people who have worked in the crime atmosphere. So I was like, I want to see if I'm capable of doing that, but in a way where I'm still treating this crime fiction novel as its own entity, and that I'm careful with treating the serial killer not as some supernatural being, but more like a damaged person influenced by a darkness either separate from themselves or it's been part of themselves since they were a kid. And there's no like soft magic, no real explanation as to why they are the way they are. So that's why when I wrote, Wasp Oil, the follow-up, I kind of followed that, that it's just
Yeah.
innate, that the magic part of Hal Burton.
Um, I'm glad you brought that up because that does touch on a few things, I wanted to talk about, throughout. But, um, the serial killer specifically,
And then
um, whose first name I'm
Chelsea,
blanking on. Chelsea, thank you. Chelsea, is it Tigra or Tigra?
I see Tikra, to me, putting an I just looked a bit strange, so I put a Y in there.
Makes sense.
It looked a bit more American to have, like, because I wanted to make her more of, like, kind of like a very young female version of Ted Bundy.
Okay.
Where, because the both of these killers have kind of the same no, not Ted Bundy, sorry. Um, uh, Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer,
Both
right?
both have kind of the same instinct where Jeffrey Dahmer, being gay, was going after men that are young and attractive to him. Where her, it was more about her trying to or enforce her perspective of love and how she wants to treat it towards her victims. And sort of like, I guess, kind of created kind of not really a cult thing, but just saying, this is how I see love. This is how love should be. How love was given to me as a kid didn't make sense. I didn't understand how people can just trust love to be part of their life when it always kind of left me. So eventually, over time, um, her, I guess her mentality got warped, and
Mhm.
that's how she became a monster.
I'm glad you brought up that point because the Tigra family is sort of the crux of this narrative. They sort of, not infect, but they are sort of part of every single aspect, including
Yeah.
the father, both sisters, and the mother to
Hmm.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Um, and the prologue opens with them in a
Hmm.
dynamic that is very less than great. I will say, to not ruin it for people who want to listen. But it's was there a struggle to effectively capture the interactions between the different members of the family, or was it something that just sort of uh, you know, building off of Chelsea sort of naturally came about?
Um, I would say the way I treated the family in terms of simultaneously separating them, but also keeping them quite involved in the story, is by making the main character Rosaria being like the driving force of getting to the main person that they're after, the main person of the family, which is Chelsea Tigra, and that the family members are more like the pieces on the chessboard that she's grabbing at randomly to try and get to the queen, which is Chelsea Tigra. So
Mhm.
it's more like I made them integral to the story, not to help solve the mystery, but to kind of round out the world so that wherever the main characters go and the closer they get to the main antagonist, um, those other family members are essentially just kind of closing in the gap between the main protagonist and antagonist.
Okay. Yeah, that it's interesting because watching their interactions and the lives they lead throughout the book,
Mm,
definitely feel like they are all kind of building towards something. And you've kind of inadvertently answered some of my questions here. We talked about, the inspiration behind the book, the
mhm.
inspiration behind Chelsea. Um, when we talk about, how looking at different serial killers influences Chelsea as a character,
Mhm.
was there a lot of research that went into that? Did you find you had to go back and look at a lot of stuff that Dahmer did or that, any other serial killers would have done to sort of, write out
Um,
effectively?
to I was trying to understand the obsession and the hotness of the market for true crime, especially for serial killers, and also I guess the formula of how true crime documentaries are written and how um the officers and anyone in law enforcement involved in these cases operate and what exactly are they focusing on to figure out the pattern because especially in the decades where finding someone who committed crime was far more difficult because it was a lot more reliant on tangible material as opposed to the digital world that we're in.
Mhm.
That required so much attention, not just to detail, but the humanity part of not just who these killers are, but how humanity and society are afflicted by these murderers that live where they are. So I've flipped the script where I created a four-person rotation in the story so that I show people it's not about how Chelsea Tigger became a monster, like verbatim. It's here's how she became a monster, but let's focus on how the city evolves throughout the story and how the detective evolves as a person when she finally gets her man. So it's not that I was trying to like rewrite the genre, which I used to say that in my interviews of crime fiction. It's more like I couldn't see in crime fiction the extremes of emotion, you know, because like when they do biopics of killers, it's less about the people afflicted by this and more about
Mhm.
can we humanize this person? Do we need to? Or can we just say this person's a monster and that's just how it came to be? So, but to get more specific, the bigger picture of why I even wrote this book, um, I was watching an interview with Guillermo del Toro, the most famous Mexican director, at least from what I've seen. Um, he was talking about the tethering of life and death. He said something like, "Life cannot begin unless it ends," and that you should see death as something beautiful. And I never thought about the poeticness of how death should be seen. Um, that we all have an expiration, and that how everyone interprets death, not just the death itself, but specifically in serial killers. The only people who are gonna feel something, um, very extreme are the victim family members. So that's
Mhm.
why I flipped it to the people, not the killer.
Um, you brought up 4 things I wanna put in that answer. You brought up 4 of the different questions I had.
Mhm,
But I'm gonna start with um, the one I think kind of sets it apart. And you said you had 4 characters or 4 perspectives. So 2 of those characters are from a first person perspective, and 2 of them are from a third person perspective. Or more specifically, 2 of them are retelling events as they're happening, and 2 of them
mhm.
are third person. Now Paolo, and
I
Scarlet.
say I treat him like an Italian, so I say Paolo.
Paolo,
Paolo. Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Paolo,
That's right. That works.
Paolo and Scarlet, they
Yeah.
are the first person, and they're very different in that Scarlet is the former is the ex-wife of the man that killed the
Like her
Tigra
first kid.
patriarch. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then her children were one of the people that Chelsea killed. And then Paolo is the doorman at the hotel and is dialed into everything. And then you have
Mhm.
Kelly and Rosaria. No, Rosaria is the detective, and Kelly and her sister run a true crime radio show. Crime is a spicy bitch. Why choose to do 2 in first person and 2 in third person? What was the choice behind there?
Uh, I saw Paolo and Scarlet as these isolated characters, and I thought having 2 isolated characters in a busy city was a good, polar opposite of how in tune, Kelly and Rosaria are, because Kelly and Rosaria have a position in terms of profession and the world that they've created for themselves, in which whether they like it or not, have to be engaged with with the city itself. Where Scarlett was focused on her family and tried to keep as much of it alive as possible, literally speaking.
Mhm.
Paolo is more of the loner who becomes brave in terms of going after true love and breaks from the solitude that he created for himself as a doorman for years. So having these polar opposites in terms of what they see around themselves and how they all 4 of these perspectives become not just engaged with the city, but actually um show their true skills as characters when they get further from the city. So that's why I did 2 first person and 2 third person.
Um, that's I think it's a great reason, and it really shows in those chapters in the definition of characters that you have, in how you define each character. And personally, I have to say Paolo was probably my favorite, if I'm being honest. I
Mhm.
think his perspective made me laugh the most, which might not be the intention, but some of the things he said made me laugh. The other one I enjoyed though is Kelly. And now Kelly, and like I said, Kelly and Millie uh, are arguably two of the more central characters in that they are in every other storyline, whether
Yeah. Mhm.
indirectly or directly. But their crime radio show, "Crime is a Spicy Bitch," is is funny because it's very it gives me the very much like shock jock kind of vibes where
Mhm.
they're
Yeah.
putting on a persona. And you did say that you have, you looked into true crime and you have friends who are into true
Mhm.
crime and everything. Um, when developing their on-air radio personalities, did you have to listen to a lot of true crime podcasts to kinda, like, cobble together pieces?
There was one, forgot the name, it's a Spanish one. Like, they speak English, but they're 2 Latinas from LA. Um, I I think it's called Cafecito Crime, something like that. So they talk about the different, like, coffees they have in the city that they try, and some desserts too, and they're just very spunky, and the way they talk about crime is so, like, not just unserious, but they're, like, deliriously excited about it, and I'm like, "Who talks so jovially about murders?" And, like, they it's almost like they don't know that the cameras the mic is there and that they're being recorded. So, I was like, either this is an act or this is just how they are. So, I was like, what if it was more of a mask instead of just it's just their excitement? So, I was like, what if at the beginning of the story, Kelly and Millie treat crime as something that they believe the city is excited to know about. That there's some kind of comfort in being excited about it. Where
Mhm.
when the mics are off, um, they realize, well, this takes a lot out of me. It takes a lot out of me to pretend like I'm fine with all this. And then when, in what's the word again? Um, Imminent danger comes closer to them, that goes away. The whole excitement about murder that has nothing to do with their lives just gets dissolved because it's no longer about um, the subject matter and more about life and how uh, I think like yeah, Kelly's more less self-aware and Millie is an emotional eater that um doesn't realize how delusional this show has made them about how they go about their life.
Interesting, interesting. Um, it's interesting that you've defined the 2 of them that way because it is clear from the outset that they are 2 different people. And Kelly's, overarching journey of dealing with the fact that she is kind of seen as sort of a joke at first, and then becoming serious and a real investigative journalist to try and find the serial killer was, in my opinion, it was an excellent story arc. I thought Kelly's journey was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Um, but, the other thing I wanna ask you about, and this has come up a few times, and it's the city of Halliburton itself. Now, Halliburton in the novel is quite an expansive city, um, and it seems to be, rather there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different areas, and there's a lot of things that you have to keep track of. So when writing it, how did you keep track of the physical limitations of the city, as well as the general locations of the events taking place in relation to each chapter? So obviously, not everything's happening at the hotel, not everything's happening at the police station. Things are happening at the same time, but also, at different times. How did you keep track of all that?
Oh, like how I kept track of where everything is, basically.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
I treated Halberton as this kind of like you're running through a video game where you don't know where everything is unless you're actually walking there or however you decide to get from point A to point Z. So rather than the city being seen as this like purely a block city where everything just is where it is, it's more like if Gotham City was this big enigmatic entity itself. Like it actually has a heartbeat, and the deeper you get into the little pockets that you're not really familiar with, um, the less safe it feels. So, for example, in my new book or the latest book, Wasp Oil, um, it only takes place, I think, like a few months later. Um, but I explore um different parts of the city that I didn't even know about. So rather than telling myself I know the city by heart, it's more like I don't know the city. So let's see where it goes, and how can I make this feel cohesive yet mysterious? So for example, I have family in Egypt, okay? In the capital, Cairo. The further away you get from the city, the more you see the poorest part of the city. So, for example, when you're on this like overpass going towards the desert, you see all of these like dead buildings, but you still see people in there. So that means that they're below poverty, or they're still permitted to live in a building, but it's a building that's not really kept up properly or even fully built. So I treated the city like that, where the further away you get from where all of the liveliness is happening, the I guess the more taken care of part of the city, because that's where all the businessmen are making their money. It's where the government feels the most in control. And um, as you go towards the Pacific Ocean, um, that's where there's the least amount of control because it's the least populated area, and therefore whoever is in a position of power and control has the least interest, and that's where the most danger happens because there's less protection over there.
That's a great analogy, and that's a great, explanation for the city. Um, Especially, comparing it to Gotham, because it does have a very Gotham-esque vibe, and I've never been to Cairo, and I can't tell you that I know what Cairo's like, but I'm gonna take your word for it. Um it is interesting, to have so many things going on in a major city, especially in a novel like this, and I have to say it's done very well. The town of Halliburton to me, the city of Halliburton to me, did have a very Gotham-esque vibe, like a
Yeah.
very, Batman kinda heavy vibe,
Hmm.
and it did feel like the 5th or, I guess technically 6th if we're counting Chelsea, 6th main character of this story. It is a living, breathing organism. We're almost at the end here, so I have 2 questions left for you. Now, these are 2 questions that I ask everybody who comes on here. I don't know if you know this, I'm a high school teacher, and literacy rates are very important to me. And as you are also in Canada, I'm sure you're aware that literacy rates in Canada are not doing well.
Sure.
But neither are they doing well in any of North America, or all of North America, let's say. So let's say you're standing in front of a high school English class or just an English class in general, and you had to give
Mhm.
one reason as to why students should read and write more. What would that reason be?
Okay, so this is actually gonna be a different answer from because like I answer this question for my fans on my YouTube channel where I focused more on why you should read if you're a writer. But for in general, why people should read, um, especially students, to me, reading is not just about your ability to sit down and focus for however many hours you want to do one activity. Reading is more about expanding your understanding of how life can be interpreted and also how even disassociation with reality can be interpreted because people when they want to read for the sake of separating themselves from the reality of life that they've either created themselves or the difficulty of circumstances and however dire your current life situation is, it's not just about wanting to be part of a world that feels comforting to you. It's it's about understanding that whoever created this separate world from you, they are doing the same thing. They are not just sharing with you what they understand from life and what they've encountered in other people. They're also saying people are different from you. And especially if you're in high school, you're not really thinking about that. You're not thinking about how everyone's life is going. You're thinking about, oh, I have grades to focus on. I have friends. I have this period of my life where I'm in between being a child and try to create some kind of identity. Well, when you're reading a book, those people, those characters already have an identity. And even if there are teen characters in the book you're reading, that's still an identity. They're still facing things that you probably have never dealt with yourself. Even if it's like a completely alien version of what you're going through, it still is a mirror image to what you might have been or currently going through. So, really, my answer to why someone in high school should be reading, it's not because it's fun or it's a safe activity to do. It's because life is so freaking complicated that it it's a good medium to have something literally in your hands physically that will help you and even encourage you to even be more empathetic, to be more of a human, you know? Because when you read a book, especially if you don't think that deeply about the concept of reading, um, you just see it as text. But for us avid readers, it's way more than textbook. It's literally a medium that is tangible that we get to use to expand our horizons because we believe that the walls that either we have put up or the circumstances of our life have put up for us, and we can break through them because as we continue to grow and get older and diversify what we read, whether we like the book or not, um, that's what helps us grow as people. So that would be my reason for reading a book.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because empathy is, I think, something that's built through reading, and a lot of authors are bringing that up. I'm glad that that's something that we can all agree on. My final question for you here is less about the students and more about the people who want to be where you are in a sense. So let's say we have someone listening who wants to be an author, or more specifically, they want to publish a book. What would do you have any advice for someone who's looking to publish?
Be self-published, be self-represented. Because no matter how much we want to just write a manuscript, send it to an editor, and then send it to a publisher and say, "Okay, turn this into a book. I'm done." You can't do that for like a number of years. And I know patience is not everyone's forte, but it is so important when you're first starting out because when you're first starting out, so you want to so much to just be glued to your passion for writing and not have to do the heavy lifting of editing, hiring both an editor and an illustrator, um, doing the marketing. You don't want to do any of that because that requires not only a lot of work, but a lot of specificity, especially if you're a niche writer. Um, so as much as it sucks to say this, but there is a very possible reality that you won't make any money or no one or very little people will read your book. And it's not because you're bad. It's because whether the writing or the reading community is growing or shrinking, um, everyone loves storytelling, whatever format it's in, whether it's on a screen or in a book or a tablet. Everyone wants a distraction because there's something about storytelling that everyone connects to because to a certain degree, no matter how busy we are, we feel some level of boredom. Whether you're a parent or you're single or you're traveling a lot, there's always this need for entertainment. And storytelling is something that will never go away, regardless of how sophisticated AI becomes. Because here's the thing: AI may become this entity that is so sophisticated that, sure, no one will be able to tell the difference between real versus fake. But it doesn't mean that your voice becomes quiet. It just means you have to work harder at not just being more unique, but being content
Mhm.
with yourself as a creator. So what I'm trying to say here is don't be afraid to just put yourself out there. Like, okay, I'm going to school for 2 years at BCIT, which is a technical school for
Mhm.
radio arts and entertainment. I
Nice.
decided to do that because I got so tired of having to do some kind of day job that is clashing too much with my writing and is sucking the life out of me. So I was like, what if I study something that I know, regardless of who I answer to and how the job goes, at least it will feed my passion.
Mhm.
And um, to keep myself engaged in writing, I started writing short stories on a German website called Inkit. Um, for those of you who
Mm.
don't know what that is, Inkit is a free platform for both readers and writers.
Oh,
So,
cool.
you have the choice of either dropping chapter by chapter, or you can save all your chapters and submit them all at once. I prefer chapter by chapter because then it becomes kind of like a series where you're
Mhm.
reading it every week or however you pace yourself. So, what I'm trying to say here is look at how your life is outside of writing and ask yourself, what is my relationship to writing? And am I happy with it? If I'm not, then I press pause on writing, make some changes, and write for the sake of just enjoying the craft.
That's a great answer. Famously, Stephen King released the Dark Tower series chapter by chapter for the first 20 years. So that's also connects to what you were talking about earlier. Um, that is pretty much all the time we have here. Uh, we over here at Cosmere, and, Grimoire is what I was trying to say. We over here at Grimoire are very pleased that you came on, and by we, I mean it's just me. I don't know why I'm using the royal we. It's just me. There's nobody else. Thank you so much for coming, AG Flitcher, uh, author of Black Rose Cocoon and Wasp Oil, and several other books that I don't know the names off the top of my head. But if you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely pick up Black Rose Cocoon. I thought it was fantastic. It's on Amazon, and it
Mhm.
is on probably other platforms that serve the author quite a bit better than Amazon does because they are a corporate greedy, greedy corporation that takes all the money. However, I got it because that was the easiest one for me to get in a quick enough time for me to read it and then be able to interview you here. Is there anything you'd like to promote before we say goodbye?
Yes, the contest is going on for another 4 weeks. So, I entered my short story Heart Splinter,
Hmm.
which is a romantasy. First time I've ever written romance, and since there is video here, I'm
Mhm.
very happy that there's still time for this. I read this how-to book of how to write
Oh,
romance novels. It's very small. I only read like half of it. It's called Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes, who is also an author. Um, I was because in the future I'm gonna write this romance novel, like a really big one. I'm calling it Driftwood Love, which involves time travel. And Heart Splinter is essentially a prequel to the story where um, this couple, in which the wife is someone who has sleepwalking,
yeah.
they encounter a time traveler who believes that she exists in every parallel universe that he's encountered her and wants her badly. So I flip it though, where I have the two men competing for her. So please, please go on Inkit, create an account, um, read it, write it, because it is the finalists and winners are based on reader reaction.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
I mean, there are judges and they will do their part too, but they're also looking at how are people engaging with your story. So it's both the community and the professional authors and judges that are looking at both the merit and audience response. So please look at that over the next 4 weeks. It's 12 chapters, so not that long. I think it's like 80, 85 pages, something like that. So I enjoyed writing it, and Driftwood Love is going to be essentially the same location, but different timeline, different kinds of characters, and very good transition for me to go into high fantasy.
Amazing. I'll be sure to check that out for sure. Thank you so much for coming on here. We are out of time. Check out Black Rose Cocoon. Check out the contest that I'm sure will be linked. Anything I post on here, I usually link to the author's Instagram account as well, so you could find everything there. But other than that, thank you everyone so much for listening. Thank you, AG Flitcher, for being here, and stay magical, my friends.